Good evening, you're watching This Week, a weekly news program. I'm your host, Anwar Ramat. And for top stories for this week we have Roerich's Heritage Scientific Conference on Mongolian Studies organized in St. Petersburg, Russia. President of Mongolia participates in the World Leaders Summit at COP26. Cabinet members paid working visit to the Taishir hydropower plant. And for the news, stay tuned. Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change are meeting in Glasgow, Great Britain on October 31st through November 12th for the UN Climate Change Conference. The official name of the Conferences of the Parties, or COP. The key focus of the meeting is to accelerate actions being taken by countries for stricter emission reductions.
Heads of state and government leaders are convening for the COP26 World Leaders Summit in Glasgow on November 1st and 2nd and are expected to announce stricter emission reduction commitments. The Mongolian Minister of Foreign Affairs reported that President Roerich will take part in the summit's general discussion and deliver a speech on Mongolia's position on combating global warming and climate change. The president will be in Glasgow until November 3rd. COP countries were asked to update their emission reduction targets before the meeting in Glasgow. The European Union and the United States have already announced stricter targets. The European Union has committed to reducing its emissions by at least 55% from the level in 1990 by 2030, and the US by at least 50% from the level in 2005 by 2030. The key background document for the meeting is the report published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in August, according to which the rise in global average temperature will exceed the limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius during this decade. The Secretariat of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change published a synthesis report on the commitments of countries in September. Based on the report, emissions will grow by 16% by 2030, but according to IPCC, they should be reduced by 45% to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. With the present commitments in place, global warming is expected to rise by about 2.7 degrees. The Glasgow meeting will not only cover emission reduction commitments, but will also focus on tools for implementing the Paris Agreement. COP26 is the first major UN event to be held in person during the COVID-19 pandemic, bringing a total about of 28,000 people to Glasgow.
Cabinet members and the Speaker of Parliament paid a working visit to the Tesher hydropower plant and got acquainted with its operations.
The Taishir hydropower plant produces and supplies electricity at a cost of 34.72 Mongolian turuk per kilowatt-hour to Zahong and Roerich provinces. The power plant supplies almost 40% of the electricity requirements of these two provinces, and last year it produced 232 megawatts of electricity. The output of this hydropower plant is quite high. For example, annually, 12 billion Mongolian turuk of subsidies used to be allocated to these two provinces' electricity consumption. Now this expenditure has decreased by about 10 billion Mongolian turuk. During the working visit, the Speaker of Parliament, Constantinovich, and the administration of the Taishir hydropower plant talked about emerging issues.
One
of the main challenges that the Taishir power plant is facing at the moment is the tax on real estate. It's 226 million MNT annually, and it has generated a total tax debt of 1.9 billion MNT since the launch. If the tax issue could be resolved, it will be possible to attract a permanent investment, meaning that the maintenance and repair will be conducted on a regular basis.
The administration of the power plant requested that the Speaker of Parliament provides the necessary support for this issue. In total, 7 similar renewable energy hydropower plants are operating in Mongolia. In case of Taishir, it produces around 1 megawatt of power for Roerich and Ulyasta. Mongolia has great potential for generating renewable energy, and another major energy and power project with great potential is the Irtenburun hydropower plant, which is yet to be constructed.
Around March of 2022, this construction work of the Irtenburun power plant is planned to commence. With the launch of that power plant, it will be possible to supply electricity to the western region of Mongolia. One major challenge we are facing is related to creating a 4-kilometer wide, 23-kilometer-long water basin. Related to this, there is a pressing need of how to relocate people currently living in the area.
For example, Norway supplies around 90% of its energy consumption from renewable sources. Mongolia has good sources of sustainable and renewable energy, but currently the country isn't as yet fully utilizing that great potential.
One of Mongolia's largest mining companies, Hirtnes Town Talga, is helping to alleviate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic in Mongolia through a massive fiscal contribution and a renewed commitment to continue investments in local infrastructure mega projects. The mining giant has also negotiated favorable trading agreements with China despite COVID-19 related obstacles.
Last year, confronted with the chaos of interrupted supply chain procedures due to COVID-19, ETC still managed to ship an impressive 15.5 million tons of coal, earning 1.68 trillion Mongolian tugrus, including 1.5 trillion Mongolian tugrus in sales revenue. The flagship company also reported a net profit of 149.4 billion Mongolian tugrus and contributed 490.1 billion Mongolian tugrus in taxes and fees to the state budget. Despite being prevented from transporting coal to China, its largest customer, ETT managed to negotiate receipt of an advance payment for the coal, which will ship as soon as the borders reopen. As one of the most profound consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been interruptions to the supply chain and a decline in exports and imports due to logistical challenges, and this represents a hope for the company and the people of Mongolia. According to a recent survey, net exports from Mongolia accounted for 6.2% of the country's GDP in the second quarter of 2018, falling to 1.9% for the same period in 2021. A 2020 study by the World Bank and the National Statistics Office of Mongolia also found that 28% of Mongolians could be called poor, and fears have been voiced that this number could swell to around 43%. Rising prices and shortages of goods are having a substantial impact on the livelihoods of ordinary Mongolians, who find that they have less and less purchasing power.
On the occasion of the 100th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Mongolia and Russia, a scientific conference on the life and achievement of Russian painter, archaeologist and scientist Nicholas Roerich was held in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Russian painter, archaeologist, and scientist Nicholas Constantinovich Roerich has introduced Mongolian tradition and culture to scholars from around the world. Scholars who study the life, works, and the family of Nicholas Roerich attended the scientific conference on his life. Mongolian researchers and scholars also attended this conference online. The scientific conference, held annually under the theme Roerich's Heritage, was organized by St. Petersburg University and the State Hermitage Museum in collaboration with the Roerich's Shambhala Mongolian Museum and the Roerich's Family Museum Institute.
3 speeches were given by Mongolian scholars. These scholars are Claret Батам Очир, Батсайхан Очирбат, and the from representative of the museum.
The former General Secretary of the International Mongolian Studies Center and academician Bira played a key role in promoting the cooperation between the museums of both countries. He was a student and follower of Yuri Roerich, son of Nicholas Roerich. During that period, Mongolian studies were thriving internationally, and also the first Congress of Mongolists was organized in Ulaanbaatar in 1959. This year marks the 100th anniversary of Mongolian-Russian diplomatic relations. Mr. Roerich was a great scientist and orientalist. I think he was a very intelligent person, real representative of St. Petersburg, the cultural center of Russia. Our museum preserves not only artifacts from life of Roerich, but also his archaeological findings.
International awards named after Nicholas Roerich were handed over during the academic conference. Mongolian Hero of Labor and academician Bira and the former president of Mongolia, Batolak, are the previous recipients of Nicholas Roerich Prize from Mongolia.
Николай Константинович
Works of Nicholas Constantinovich Roerich are spreading across Russia, USA, India, the UK, France and Mongolia. His family members are all renowned and have an interesting story behind them. For these reasons, I'm drawn to the research of this family.
В Англии, в Карелии.
Премия имени Николая Рериха.
We have successfully organized the international conference on Nicholas Roerich. As a tradition, the awards were delivered in 5 categories. The prize of the preservation of the cultural heritage and peacekeeping was handed over to the Lama and the 102nd Khanten Tripa, Kyabje Rizong Rinpoche. We hope to further develop mutually beneficial cultural relations in the future.
Премию Шерет Ламе.
In 1935, leaders of 21 countries signed the Roerich Pact on protecting the sanctity of cultural heritage. Back then, people didn't fully grasp the idea of what cultural heritage was all about, but nowadays, scholars from around the world pay more attention to the understanding and protection of cultural heritage.
The One Drop of Blood Full Life campaign is organized jointly by the National Center for Blood Transfusion of Mongolia and the National University of Medical Sciences in order to increase blood reserves, and within the frame of this campaign, university students are actively donating their blood.
Blood is collected from about 600 to 650 people weekly to build up a sufficient supply of blood products. So far, 300 to 350 people have been donating blood daily. So the students of 6 universities joined this campaign. According to doctors, 3 types of blood products are produced from one person's blood and distributed to hospitals.
The students are healthier than elderly. I think donating blood is right. I am happy to be able to potentially save many lives. This campaign will continue for 2 weeks. After that, it will continue at the National University of Mongolia, and other state universities will also join this campaign. In total, we have estimated that about 4,000 students and teachers will be part of this campaign, and around 1,005 liters of blood will be collected from all the participants.
Demand for blood products has increased by about 10% since the pandemic. For example, one liver transplant requires blood collected from more than 500 people. According to the National Center for Blood Transfusion Research, 2 to 3 liver transplantation operations are performed weekly. As of today, the blood supply is normal, but it is necessary to consider the risk and build up a sufficient supply.
Medical care is provided 24 hours a day. We work with a certain amount of resources because we don't know in advance when and what kind of needs will occur. We will continue to collect blood from donors on a daily basis to ensure that the blood donation campaign is properly understood by all our citizens. The production of blood products is a joint effort.
According to the World Health Organization, 3% of countries with a population of more than 1,000 people must donate blood. In our country, only 1.2% of the population regularly donates blood.
On November 2nd, the Prime Minister of Mongolia, Oirtung, received a number of previous Prime Ministers of Mongolia. Accepting the invitation of the Prime Minister, 9 former Prime Ministers of Mongolia attended the meeting.
Notably, former Prime Ministers and Presidents of Mongolia, Inkbayar and Elbegdorj, attended the meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, Prime Minister Oirtung provided detailed information on the social and economic situation of Mongolia during the COVID-19 pandemic, and introduced solutions on protecting health, intensifying the economy during the pandemic, and reducing restrictive measures. The former Prime Minister spoke about the current challenging situations, possible solutions, and their experiences. They also discussed current urgent issues such as the Oyo-Talka contract and local currency inflation. The former and current Prime Ministers agreed on the need to support the private sector and increase public participation in government decisions. In addition, a proposal to maintain a stable continuity of government policies and directions providing professional and methodological support for implementing Mongolia's long-term development policy and making decisions and recommendations based only upon research and analysis of the socio-economic situation were all discussed. Former Prime Minister Sottom Сайханбилэг and Амар Жаргал, former Prime Minister and President of Mongolia Roerich couldn't attend the meeting. In case of the president, he's been attending the COP26 conference on climate change.
Now let's take a look at Mongolia's current affairs that happened this week.
The president of Mongolia, Roerich, delivered a statement on November 1st at the general debate of the COP26 World Leaders Summit held in Glasgow, the United Kingdom. He noted in his message, by planting a single tree, it creates favorable conditions for other plants and bushes to grow, absorbing carbon dioxide and retaining soil moisture, making a positive contribution to the preventive actions being taken against land degradation and desertification. However, by planting hundreds and thousands of trees, it is possible to return an area to its former state, whereas by planting millions or even billions of trees, it is possible to restore the ecology of an entire region. In his message, the president highlighted the importance of planting and growing trees in large numbers in tackling the issue for an entire region. The President of Mongolia, Roerich, met with the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Ibrahim Thiaw, in Glasgow to exchange views on cooperation. President Roerich said that Mongolia attaches great importance to combating climate change and desertification and noted that planting trees is one of the most inclusive ways to address these ongoing challenges. He said that by 2030, he will have launched an initiative to plant 1 billion trees and decide to spend at least 1% of GDP annually on combating desertification and climate change. During the meeting, President Roerich stressed the importance of the support of the UN Convention to combat desertification and its mechanisms in combating climate change, desertification, and land degradation. The UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary expressed their readiness to cooperate. During the meeting, the parties exchanged views on the possibility of organizing an international conference and event on combating desertification in Ulaanbaatar.
Here's our regular feature on sports that happened this week. After 2 days, Latvia's Team Riga were crowned champions of the FIBA 3vs3 World Tour Abu Dhabi Masters 2021. Ulaanbaatar MMC Energy finished second in the group stage. They finished the tour in the top 8 after a loss to Serbia's Liman. Battled to the final after knockout wins over Princeton 19-16 in the last 8 and Liman 20-18 on overtime in the last 4. Ulaanbaatar MMC Energy from Mongolia participated in the competition. They lost their first. Well, that's all for this week. We will see you next week with more news and updates. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.